An interesting idea appeared recently in the New York Times Magazine. It's a video produced by Quality Video of Minneapolis, and it's entitled Video Baby. It's designed for consumers who are devoted to family values but can't seem to find the time to start a family. This 30-minute tape shows two infants doing what babies tend to do, like crawl around the house, play with the rattle, take a bubble bath, and turn lunch into a complete mess. There's no narrator, and there's no cleanup. So once the tape is in the VCR, there's nothing to come between the viewer and the baby but the off button. Of course, some things are left out, like crying and spitting up, not to mention the challenge of a full diaper. As the package says, enjoy bath time without being splashed and mealtime without wearing the food. Sounds good, huh? All the joys of parenthood and none of the inconveniences. Just set the VCR. I can hardly wait, or hardly imagine the possibilities of the video virtual teenager. This is Mother's Day. What a challenging time to be a mother, grandmother, aunt, any of those things. Women have a tough role. One mom named Linda Rossetti says she was pleased that the brightly striped sweaters that she had received as a gift seemed to have a slimming effect on her figure. That's a pretty sweater, Mommy, her 6-year-old son told her. You look like Wheel of Fortune. Thank you, sweetheart, Linda replied, but I think you mean that I look like Vanna White. And he said, no, Mom, I mean you look like the wheel. It's challenging to be a mom, but what a privilege and what a responsibility. TV anchorman Dan Rather has traveled throughout the world to report most of the major events of our times. He has been witness to wars, natural disasters, and man's inhumanity to man. In his book, The Camera Never Blinks Twice, Rather tells of a moment from the Vietnam War that still haunts him to this day. The year was 1965, and he was touring a hospital ship near South Vietnam. His guide took him below deck to a very large room filled with soldiers recovering from amputations. He describes the horror that he felt as he observed row upon row of young men lying there in bandages. All were horribly wounded and in tremendous pain. Most men moaned, and a few cried out. And the one name that the men cried out constantly was Mother. When their suffering was so great as to be unbearable, they didn't call for a doctor or a nurse. They called for their mothers. Rather comments that in our very worst moments, when we are the most desperate for comfort, we turn to the first love we ever knew, that of our mothers. There is no relationship on earth more intimate than the relationship of a mother and her child, unless it is the relationship between a believer and their God. Jesus says, whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him. This is from John 14:21. And again in John 14, we read, before long the world will not see me anymore, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. verses 19 and 21. In these verses, Christ is saying to us that this world was designed for love, for family, for relationships, for intimacy. In our readings this morning, the Father and Jesus are building their home within us in the John passages. And the Holy Spirit is building our future home in our reading from Revelation. It's good that we should have this day to celebrate the home and mothers who are traditionally known as homemakers. And it all means so much to us. After all, it is in the home that we learn who we are. It is in the home that our identity is established. The parents of Roland Hayes, the famous singer, had been slaves. Roland's father died when he was just a boy, and the child grew up in poverty, but with the influence of a good Christian mother. Doors began to open to Roland because of his musical talent. When invited to sing for the British monarch, he sent a cable to his mother, which bore a note of pride. She responded with just 4 words: "Remember who you are." I suspect that some of us received that message from our mothers somewhere along life's journey. Remember who you are. It is in the home where we learn who we are. Are we persons of worth, persons of value? Are we bright, capable persons of promise? There was an article in Ebony magazine this time last year that featured a story about basketball star Karl Malone of the Utah Jazz. Karl's father left his wife and 8 children when Karl was still very little. Shirley Malone raised the children by herself. She worked 2 jobs and she scrimped and saved to make ends meet. A measure of her devotion showed in Karl's great success. There was no money in the Malone family for basketball equipment, and there was no basketball court near where the Malones lived. So when little Karl became fascinated by the game, Shirley Malone became a human basketball hoop, holding up her arms so Karl could shoot the ball through them over and over again. And as he grew, she stood on chairs and tables to allow him to continue his practice. Karl Malone has been one of the NBA's most worthy role models. He learned from his mother not only how to shoot a basketball, he learned that his life was important. That's a lesson a child can learn even if there is no money in the house. In the home, we learn who we are. We also learn what is expected of us. Family values, it's sometimes called. And it is a very important issue. For 20 years, Dennis Prager has been asking high school seniors a fascinating question. Would you save your dog or a stranger first if both were drowning? Here's what he found. 1/3 always vote for the dog. 1/3 always vote for the stranger. And 1/3 always say the question is too hard to answer. But Prager's second question is even more interesting. Prager asks the students who voted to save the person, are the students who voted to save the dog wrong? Not one student says Prager has ever said that the others are wrong. Their argument is always the same. Listen, I personally feel that I should save the person, but they personally feel that they should save their dog.